Let's go to the coach's corner here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, obviously, some head coaches here. And I want to talk about, first I want to talk about this list here that was put out on Twitter by College Basketball Report. So it's at CBK Report, and this is the top 40 college basketball coaches, and these are current coaches. So before we get into this, and I'll give you we're not going to go through all 40. I'm going to give you some of the top names. I wanted to have a discussion, coach to coach, and then obviously as a player's perspective, T-Mac. When you're evaluating, not at the high school level, but at this top tier level, the top coaches in D1 basketball, what are some of the things that would factor into your decision making? What are some criteria you would say you would use to evaluate? Maybe separating the top, 3 or 4 coaches from each other.
Separating coaches from one another. I mean, I think one of the most obvious ones up there is wins. Is reeling in a bunch of wins. But I think when it comes to other factors that don't involve direct wins, I think you look at you look at how the program started versus how it is now. And I'd love to go off some names on this list here in a moment. I won't steal the topic from you, but there's one coach in particular I'd really like to highlight here in a moment. But I think improvement over a certain amount of time. Nowadays it's hard. Maybe 10 years ago we could have said this, but I was going to say players staying. If you've got a track record of your players staying rather than transferring, I think that's a big key factor in coaching right there. But gosh, I mean, you look at nowadays, look at all these up and coming coaches right here. I think coaches that have stayed at one program for a long time too is a big factor. I think that gains a lot of respect in the coaching world. Okay.
Coach, what are some attributes that you would use to evaluate the top coaches in the profession, speaking of at the college level?
Sure. Unfortunately, being a coach, I hate to use the term wins, but that's always going to be how people decide stuff. To T-Mac's point, I think we're getting in a day when people are always leaving early to go pro. And so seeing people transfer into your program should be a new factor now that goes into it. That kind of goes along with that. So seeing kind of where people want to play, who they want to play for. But the thing that I think is the coolest, kind of like T-Mac hit on it a little bit, was where are they at the end of the year? They may have lost 7 to 10 non-conference, but did they get better during the conference? Are they always competing? Are they always competitive? Every year are they a team that, could they make a run? Like, do they have a chance to go deep? So that's kind of, it all kind of goes together, but just from the college standpoint, it's hard to kind of dive deep and on a personal level. So it's kind of hard to rank them when you never really have that chance to see what goes in day to day. But I think just seeing that competitiveness, can you compete at the end of the year? Are you in it during conference tournament champ week? Those are all good factors, I think.
Okay. So obviously, I'm with you guys. You've got to go with your wins, improvements. Sure. One thing or two things I want to talk about really. One is, and it's a little bit less, I think, or more difficult to quantify in basketball than maybe football, but is kind of the coach's tree, meaning how many assistant coaches have gone on to be successful head coaches. You're developing a staff that these people can then go out and successfully run their own programs, because I think that certainly says something, because you may have some coaches that if they're paranoid, they don't want to share their secrets. Well, they're not going to be able to develop those coaches. And the other thing I think is, kind of the what is the program like as far as compliance? What is the program like as far as, do they have these violations that pop up? Some of these coaches leave, you're seeing something in the football world at Tennessee where, they're getting these sanctions. Heupel wasn't there when it's occurred, but the school's paying $8 million. Do you leave a trail of mayhem and your dust. You leave and you were successful, but now the program collapses. So I really look at wins. I look at the integrity of the program. Again, that's hard for us to know for sure. And I look at kind of the coaching tree are three of the big things that I really look at. So let's talk about some of these names on this list. Like I said, this was posted by College Basketball Report, and it is the top 40 college basketball coaches. These are active coaches. And so let's go. We'll start with number 6. So number 6 is Kelvin Sampson at U of H. Okay, number 5 is Tom Izzo at Michigan State. Number 4 is Scott Drew at Baylor. Number 3, Mark Few at Gonzaga. Tony Bennett at Virginia. And number 1 is Bill Self. So first of all, do you have any argument that any of those 6 should not be in the top 6 based off of y'all's criteria, or you think they kind of at least nailed? Maybe you don't agree exactly with order, but you don't have a disagreement with those with that order.
I mean, I was going to say the only one I might disagree with just a little bit is, and I think he's a great coach. I really do. I think Tony Bennett maybe just be a little bit high on that list. Virginia, I mean, he's got a national championship, unfortunately, against my Red Raiders in there. He's got him a national championship, and he's young. Tony Bennett is a young guy. He's if you look at Virginia year in and year out, what do they do best? They shoot the 3 ball really well, and they play defense. He's kind of got a groundwork, a game plan, a system there in Virginia that really works. So I don't want to take any credit away from him. I just don't know if Tony Bennett has coached long enough for me to put him that high. I mean, to be number 2 on the list is just a little much for me. I think he probably deserves to be in the top 10, but coming in at number 2 is a little high to me. That's the only one that really stuck out to me.
Okay. Coach?
I would definitely piggyback off that, but I would say Scott Drew shouldn't be in that list. I mean, of course he's won national championship and he's turned a struggling Baylor team into a national contender. But if you're talking top 6 coaches in all of college basketball, there's no way I'm not sticking Rick Pitino. There's no way I'm not sticking. I mean, Matt Painter seems to choke every time he gets there, but the dude wins one of the toughest conferences every single year. I even, Greg McDermott, I feel like is such an underrated guy. I mean, the dude's made Creighton. I mean, nobody knew Creighton until he got there, and now all of a sudden Creighton's, a top 3 seed. Yeah, top 3 seed in the tournament every single year. Not saying Scott Drew won't get there and eventually, but just in the here and the now, I probably wouldn't have him that high. But definitely not Tony Bennett. One thing I'm going to give y'all 3. Just looking at the list, I'm going to give you 3 names, and I want you to tell me the first thing that speaks out about them. Mick Cronin, Eric Musselman, and Kelvin Sampson. What's something that resonates with all 3 of those guys? And you can even throw Tony Bennett in there. Throw Tony Bennett.
Young, wild, and they play defense.
Yeah.
Extremely energetic. Charismatic players, coaches.
Right. I kind of wish, going back to one of your answers now, like how you judge a coach. I mean, I feel like if you can guard somebody and play defense, I feel like that's a very special trait that you have, because to be successful defensively, it don't take skill, it takes effort. And so if you're playing hard defensively, you're playing for somebody that you're wanting to go out there and battle for. Mick Cronin, Mick Cronin should definitely be higher than 10. Dude, I mean, he's never lost. He's always been a winner. Sorry, I go on a rant for a while, so you better take over.
Let me throw a name out at you. Not that he should be in the top 6, not even necessarily in the top 10, but Rick Barnes sitting at 18. What are your thoughts on Rick Barnes?
Barnes, obviously being a local guy here for a long time at Texas, I think Rick Barnes would be higher up on that list had he gotten himself a national championship at Texas, or if he had been able to. I think he's doing great things at Tennessee. I think part of the reason Texas eventually decided to move on from him is things just got a little bit stagnant. Heard some things about how hard he is on his players. I remember back when that was always a rumor. Rick Barnes never had any kind of scandals or anything, never did anything wrong, but just how physical his teams were, how hard he was on his teams. I think the one thing that's just missing from Rick Barnes' resume is just that big time championship.
Yeah.
I think that would move him up on the list had he have that, because it seems like every year, whether it be Texas or Tennessee, Rick Barnes always has his team in the tournament and relevant as well.
Yeah, the reason I bring him up is his name wouldn't have really registered with me, but a couple of weeks ago on this podcast when we were ranking, the where the coaches are, I don't remember what his number was, but I was surprised with how many wins he had.
He's up there,
and so that's kind of why I brought that up. So okay, so so that's our the top six. Obviously, you guys are kind of in agreement. Maybe bump Tony Bennett down some. Coach, you said possibly Scott Drew down.
No, I love Scott Drew. I was waiting to try. He's my favorite coach in college basketball, and I'm saying that from another Big 12. Being a Red Raider, I love Scott Drew. The reason I disagree with you, Coach, is what he was the reason I threw this in as part of my answer. What should rank a head coach? You look at what he took over in 2004 at Baylor. He took over a team that probably should have been given the death penalty for college basketball. I know Tripp and I have talked recently on the podcast about the mess he took. I mean, there was if I remember right, a player had killed another player on the team. If I remember correctly, you'd have to.
And then the coach, if this is the same time frame, then was trying to get the players to sort of disavow knowledge of it, sort of cover it up.
Mm-hmm. But you look at, I mean, my dad was working at Baylor with the golf program back when Scott Drew was first hired on, and what he took over and what he took over a program that was just really bad. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They were winning. They weren't even winning 10 games a year, and he took them over. And I love Scott Drew. Most people don't know Scott Drew didn't play college basketball. Scott Drew, I believe he actually played college tennis, and I think he gets overlooked by his brother a lot, Bryce. The famous
Bryce, hitting that game winner,
famous shot at Valpo and everything. I mean, I think Scott Drew, what he's done at Baylor, I think the biggest thing for him is recruiting. I think how he's able to bring in guys to Waco and to Baylor. He's fantastic. He's a tough nose. He runs that zone, that annoying zone that we've seen Jim Boeheim run for so long. But tough nosed defensive coach, and he's in it every year. And it was only a matter of time before Baylor, a couple of years, finally got him a national championship. I think Scott Drew's right where he should be, Coach. I have to disagree with you on that one.
All right, so here's my next question, and I'll start with Coach, and then I'll go over to you. So, Coach, you are bumping Tony Bennett and Scott Drew. Don't worry about the order. There's two out of the that top six. So two more can go in somewhere in the top six. You don't have to tell me exactly where. Which two? Because you mentioned several. Which two would you put in their place? Doesn't have to be like exactly two. Number 2 and number 4, but two more coaches that would go ascend into the top six. If you took those two out, who would they be?
I'm going to say Mick Cronin for sure, and Greg McDermott's going to be a hard sell for me not to slot him in there, just by what he's able to build and his loyalty to the program. I would probably say them too. Obviously, this kind of goes back. Neither one of them have a national championship to hang on. But it may be the fact that I'm not a Big 12 fan, or I just don't watch as much Big 12 and follow it. But the way Mick Cronin and Greg McDermott leads, I have a lot of respect for their programs.
Okay. So T-Mac, you're bumping Tony Bennett, who's, again, doesn't have to replace him at number 2, but who's sliding into that top 6 from outside of it to take his place?
Man, this is such a good list, and we'll retweet it on our personal accounts and the Lowdown College Basketball Twitter as well, just so you guys can see the same list that we're looking at. But man, I love what Coach is saying about McDermott. There's so many good names on this list right here, but if we're talking current right now, just I'm going to have to go with Eric Musselman. I think I think if this was an all-time list, then no. I think we'd see Pitino higher. We'd see Sean Miller higher, who's lurking down there around in the 30s somewhere. I think we'd see Rick Pitino. We'd see a lot of these guys jump up if it's an all-time list. But current coaches right now, I think Eric Musselman is as a valiant say so to be in that top 5. I mean, you look at the passion this guy coaches at. I mean, he brought back the 40 minutes of hell there in Fayetteville for them. I mean, he plays tough-nosed. It's almost like rolling out the Memphis Grizzlies in college basketball. It might not always be pretty offensively, but he's going to throw out 5 guys who'll go out there and defend the basketball. And I think Eric Musselman's got a great program there in Fayetteville, and I think Arkansas is going to be good as long as he's there.
All right, man. As T-Mac said, we will tweak this list out. I know you all want to check it out. I think it's a really good list. And obviously, when you have 40 names on there, you're not going to agree with no one's always going to agree. But I think obviously a lot of thought put into this. And so check out the list and let us know what you think and who would you change. Anybody not make the top 40 you think that should, please let us know.
And I kind of wonder this too, Coach Tripp. I'll throw in one more thing. I think Coach made a great point. Why is someone like Bruce Pearl, Pitino, Sean Miller? What's the common denominator? That why are they not a little bit higher? I think did I say Bruce Pearl? I meant
you
Bruce
did.
Pearl.
You did.
Okay. Why are those guys not a little bit higher on this list? Coaching wise, those might be 3 of the best right there. But why are they not higher? Scandal, absolutely. But it's Scandal right there. I think Rick Pitino could be the best coach on this list, if I'm being honest. But I don't know. We'd have to talk to these guys who run this account. Maybe that's why they're holding them back a little bit. But that's the one thing right there. 3 of these guys just caught my mind. I just wanted to respond to what Coach Behringer was saying about some of those other names. I think Scandal might be holding those guys back a little bit on that list.